pensions. Can you hear me? I've been contributing £40,000 yearly. Hello, is this the advice line? I must have called 1,000 times to tell you I'm sorry. I made a mistake, oh, but when I call you, never seem to be open.
Hello and welcome to an episode of Tax Able. Today I'm joined by Zach Stafford, and I will let Zach introduce himself and tell you what he does.
Hi, thank you very much for having me. So I think it's the first thing to say when you come on these type of things. No, my name is Zach Stafford and I am a financial advisor. I'm actually based in Italy at the moment, although I cover most of Europe, that is in the EU, the EEA. And mainly what I specialise in is UK pensions, looking at that from an international perspective, or perhaps people who are moving back to the UK, or anyone who simply just wants some advice on how their UK pension, whether that's state, private, occupational, DB, DC, we can get into that in a moment, and how they operate, and obviously any upgrades or anything that's available to an international resident, or as I said, someone moving back. So that's where.
Amazing. So I don't know if many people realise that accountants and tax advisors can't actually give advice on pensions. So you need an expert like yourself for that. We advise on withdrawing or making contributions and the tax implications of those, but we can't actually say to someone what they should or should not be doing. So it's always handy, I think, for an accountant or a tax advisor to have a pension advisor on hand.
Yeah, for sure. I actually think that what works really well is actually combining the two, getting a piece of advice from an accountant, because I will be totally honest, when it comes to the tax side of things, I'm not necessarily, definitely not the smartest person in this room, that's for sure. So I'm more on the side of the investment perhaps as well, which sometimes that accountants can't, they're fantastic at the tax side of things, but, what we're looking at in terms of returns, risk profiling, and then also ultimately how you can spend money from that pension scheme and save for your retirement. Yeah,
definitely. So I know nothing about pensions. I know that I pay in one with my day-to-day job, and I have looked into getting a private pension, but I am a complete novice. So can you teach me something about pensions, please?
I suppose a little bit. Okay. So I think the main thing that what we need to understand with pension schemes, and part of the negative connotations around pensions, is that, when you're growing up, it's always your grandmother who's they're on a pension, aren't they? It's that kind of sense of mobility around it. But in terms of an asset, it can actually be one of the most effective, if not the most effective, investment tool that someone can have in their financial arsenal. When you think about, some of the tax incentives that you got for paying into a pension scheme, especially from an income perspective in the UK, then you can use that not only to mitigate taxation that you'd pay on a standard investment, because I know if you know about capital gains tax, right? On pensions which aren't necessarily on assets which aren't necessarily in a wrapper, whilst a pension contribution where you can obviously contribute £40,000 tax free of your income a year, or 100% of your relevant UK earnings, depending on which one is higher at the time. So with that, you've got an opportunity to pay in pre-tax money into an investment which also can grow tax-free. And then ultimately, when you come to take the money out of the pension scheme, you can take a 25% tax-free lump sum, or PCLS, as we call it in the industry.
I think it's really key that you pointed out that you get tax relief when you pay it in, and some people may not realise that the government actually top up essentially the amount of tax that you would pay. And that's the way it works in the UK. And also that if you are self-employed, yes, you have a £40,000 annual allowance, but if your business profits aren't that high, you may not be able to utilise that 40,000 as well. So you need to be aware of how much you can actually invest, and especially in those earlier years, you may not be able to do, say, more than 10 or 20,000. But it's good to do it year on year, isn't it, to keep it growing?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, when we, especially in volatile markets as we're in at the moment, when it comes to the investment side of things, looking at dollar cost averaging, which is effectively making sure you're paying in on a regular a regular basis. So when you've got the opportunity, especially when you're in an employed capacity, to pay in on a regular basis from your pre-tax income, then not only are you paying in some, but typically your employer will match your income or even pay in slightly more. Okay, so we can go into the kind of the brackets of that in a moment. Yeah.
And would you suggest for, say, younger people that are just starting out and working, is it better to, say, invest in a pension rather than everyone's investing in, say, crypto and NFTs? And I think that draws a lot of it draws a lot of attention because, you know, they're seen as very exciting and you can get great returns.
Yep.
But I guess maybe sometimes the pension falls to the wayside if someone's not in employment and they don't have to or have the option to pay into a pension.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's at the moment it's crypto and NFTs which are getting the headlines, whilst you're not really getting that from pension side of things. But the truth is if you look at, and as we mentioned before, when young people or whoever are shopping around or looking for a personal pension perhaps, then if you look at some of the more, let's say, integrated platforms that are available via, you know, I don't endorse any of these companies perhaps, but someone like AJ Bell, Hargreaves Lansdown, who have got these effectively, you know, their platform investment tools. And you can use them as effectively as you could any kind of trading platform, but you've got all the benefits of having it as a pension as well.
Okay.
And you can, of course, use and purchase different asset classes in there, one of which being crypto, or, you know, it will move into that kind of NFT space in the future, I imagine. But you've got, you know, open architecture, as we call it, for investment. And you can utilize all those different exciting things that necessarily you wouldn't associate.
You can
with
have like a
pension.
diversification and
Exactly.
a mixed portfolio. Okay,
Of course,
yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly, yeah.
So what different types of pensions are there?
Okay, so there's obviously, in the UK, I'd probably say mainly, if we talk about there's different variations, okay, of course. But the two private pension schemes, I'd say, that you need to consider or have considerations of is defined contribution, which is your money purchase arrangement. And this is where, very simply, the contribution is defined. You know how much is going in, right? And that's where you pay in some from your income, okay? And your employer typically matches it.
Like
right?
if you pay 3% from your salary and then your employer pays like 5% or something.
Correct.
Yeah,
exactly. The other one would be defined benefit, which is final salary. Now, there aren't too many of these schemes around anymore.
Yeah, the teachers used to have them, didn't
so
they?
the USS is the one at the moment, which is the problem with these schemes is they are a very good idea and they're very attractive in terms of, you know, I'll come and work for us and I'll effectively give you 1/60th of your salary times 20 as a quick calculation for you in retirement. So and you don't even have to contribute for it. It's a great bonus to have.
Oh, wow.
The only issue with these pension schemes these days is that they are horrifically underfunded, and people are living longer in terms of demographics. So you've got people who, you know, typical retirement, people used to live until they were probably, you know, 70 and retire at 65. So this company would only have to pay them for 5 years. We've now got people who are retiring at 55 years old and living into their 80s and even 90s. With inflation going up as it is as well, these pension schemes are keeping line with inflation, typically CPI. So therefore, these pension companies are having to pay more money out for longer, and they're just really non-sustainable. And as I said before, you would have seen with the USS pension scheme, they're all protesting at the moment because there simply isn't enough money in this pot to pay the pensioners. And what's interesting for me is that the USS final salary pension scheme, it's the oldest pension scheme in the UK. And it just seems funny to me that it's the first one that's literally had to turn around and go, we don't have enough money to pay you, please. So the members are striking, obviously. So we've seen some of these pension schemes recently that we know we're in trouble, and perhaps we're going to see more of these pension schemes come into default. But you know, if you do have one, good on you. But there are some options you can take to combat this change, these sort of pitfalls of having this type of pension scheme at the moment.
Yeah, I think I remember reading a little while ago that they're not really bringing out any new DB? Defined benefit.
Defined benefit pensions.
Pension schemes that really, it's all going to be defined contribution because of the issues with them being underfunded. And
exactly.
Then, did the government bail a couple of them out? I can't quite remember.
Well, there is something called the PPF, which is the Pension Protection Fund. So if a company, for example, has happened recently, Toys R Us, Virgin, Carillion, these companies have gone bust. And what happens is, what happens to the pension scheme then? So it falls in something called the PPF. And it's funny because the FCA and HMRC, I hope none of them are watching at the moment, they tout this as a very big positive. The truth is, it's a lifeboat coming off of the Titanic. It's not the same. Right? You're capped at typically 90%. So therefore you don't necessarily have this, won't get the same amount. And then does it still grow the same? Not always. Okay. The other sad thing with final salary pension schemes is that, unlike a defined contribution, is that when you die with a final salary pension scheme, typically what's offered is 50% to your spouse. So if you're getting £10,000 a year, you pop your clogs, your spouse will get 50%. Okay. When you die, when your spouse dies, they then get nothing. Right. It's then gone. Okay. With a money purchase arrangement, obviously the whole amount gets paid to your beneficiary if you die before 75 years old, completely tax-free.
So amazing.
It forms a very good inheritance strategy. Therefore, so if you have a DC worth 100,000 and you were to die, and then your partner or your whoever it was, you could actually choose your beneficiaries as well.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be a spouse; it could be a child, or it could be a friend or anyone.
Yeah, exactly. And then once they die, they can pass it on as many times as they want.
Oh, that's good, tax free as well.
Yeah. So the income. Yeah. So, however, if you die after 75 years old, then it's taxed as income.
Yeah, that makes sense though, because you didn't really get enough time to really use your pension, I guess, before.
No, exactly. Yeah.
And then you have your lifetime allowance, don't you? Of, I think it used to be $1 million, but now it's like 1,073,000.
78,100. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what it was is the lifetime allowance is effectively how much you can have in your pension scheme without breaching a limit, which then is taxed quite severely, actually.
Yeah.
So
it's almost punitive, isn't it? That they don't want you to hold that much cash in a pension.
Well, I mean, the reason why they did it, do you remember the banker's bonus scandal and all these people? What the bankers realised is when their bonuses were getting taxed so severely is they realised they could just chuck them all into their pension scheme and effectively then not pay any tax.
And then the companies would get tax relief as well.
With the lifetime allowance, what they've done is they've basically made this cap so that people, because $1 million is a lot of money to your average employee or self-employed person in the UK to have in a pension scheme. That is a lot of money, right? But it used to be 1.8 million. And since that's when I first started working in this industry, it was 1.8 million. I've just seen it gradually come down and down and down and down and down. And part of the reason for that is that the tax that the government can reclaim is so high. I think they've claimed, I think it was 9 billion in the last 2 years from bringing the threshold down. Because so anything over $1 million, and then what they've done is they've added their inflation proofing.
Oh, okay. Is that what it was?
That's why it's creeping up. Anything over that is taxed. The income is taxed at 25%, and if you take a lump sum, 55%.
Oh wow! So it's not worth it at all.
Yeah. So the truth is when you're starting off in your career and you're young, definitely get into building up your pension scheme, and then by the time if you give yourself a 25-year investment horizon, if you manage to get to $1 million, great, good for you. And then and this is another thing with these final salary pension schemes as well. When you come to take the money from them, there are different modes of this, but it's called a benefit crystallization event. And what they do is they test your lifetime allowance at that point, and they do a calculation that takes into consideration your final salary pension. So if you're on, if you've got a final salary of around £20,000 a year, they'd roughly value that pension at around £500,000. So you're not going to be at the lifetime allowance there, but you might have noticed recently in the news as well, where these doctors, a lot of them haven't been coming out of retirement or have not wanting to, and they've been complaining about their pension schemes because of because they're going to get about £90,000.
Yeah, so they're gonna breach the limit.
They're going to breach the limit. Yeah, so that's what they kind of when the COVID situation was happening, these doctors wanted these assurances on their pensions
because they were delaying their retirement just to help out the NHS, weren't they?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, it's I mean, it's the funny thing about pensions is, I guess, as well, is it's the ex-chief economist at the Bank of England is quoted as saying, I consider myself quite financially savvy and literate. However, I cannot make any sense of pensions. So it's one of those areas where, you can talk about it till your face goes blue. But to be honest, it's just there is a lot to take in. There really, really is.
Whenever I see, there was always like a chapter to do with pensions with my exams, but we roughly touch on like whether it was a DC or a DB.
Yep.
But that was many years ago. But really, as soon as we hear it in the office, we're like, oh no, pension expert, don't want to touch it, don't know. We do accounts for schools, but what are they called now? Academies. They've turned into academy trusts.
Yeah, my school's an academy trust now. Yeah,
essentially they're run almost like a company, but they're still government funded. So I think they've got a little bit more control.
So they can get more funding, isn't it? As I understand.
But the pension pages in the accounts, I breezed past those.
Really?
I was like, that looks roughly what that's meant to say. I'll leave that up to someone with a higher pay grade than me to double check. But I think it's just because there's so much information you have to declare.
Yep.
Because obviously there's requirements there for a reason, that you have to have notes to the accounts, you have to have information declared when you've got these certain types of pensions, because they need it to be transparent. But sometimes I feel like it's a bit like information overload.
I completely agree that when people have these thoughts about pension schemes, one of the other ones is there is just not enough clear information, and they're not really sexy. There's nothing really that's going to get younger people interested in looking into their pension schemes.
The only way I can really think of making it more interesting is when I think about how much am I going to get when I reach, say, 55 or 65, now turning to 67? How much can I get per year? If I put in X now and I keep doing that now, what can I give up work, and what salary will I have, and what sort of lifestyle would I have? I say salary, but the amount that you're withdrawing annually, but treat it as a salary. Then I can kind of visualize what my life would be like, and then I think that would get me more excited now, like after turning 10-30 a little while ago. But now you do start to think, okay, well, maybe because our parents are getting a bit older and they're starting to take their pensions, I'm like, actually I probably need to know about what I'm going to get and what's my lifestyle going to be like.
Exactly. I think it's about gratification, isn't it? We live in this instant gratification world, but a pension is definitely a longer term investment. And I completely agree that part of what I love about my job is as I sort of spoke about earlier slightly, is a lot of advisors in my space, they don't do a clear spending strategy. And one of my favorite questions when I speak to clients is, what does retirement look like for you? Where are you going to be? How much do you consider to live off to be comfortable? What do you want to do? What's your lifestyle going to look like? And then we really try and draw a picture of what that's going to be and how we can facilitate that, either with their pension or with other assets. And I think you're totally right that I kind of think about the future myself now, and I think, I'm excited about retirement, but it's not the only thing I ever think about to get excited about, right?
It's only one day a week.
Exactly, yeah. But it's a lot of people do massively underestimate the amount that they will need in retirement. Well, I mean, I'll ask you the question. If you think about the day, right, split into 8 hours, 8 hours, 8 hours. You spend 8 hours working, 8 hours sleeping, and 8 hours leisure, right? When do you spend the most money?
All in your leisure.
All in your leisure, right? So when we stop working, we double the amount of leisure time that we have. So people go, I'll need less money in retirement. The sad truth is you actually do need more, right?
Yeah, because you end up going on more holidays. You then go on more trips to go see family, and just get new hobbies.
Exactly, and you've got a bigger family.
Yeah.
Did you say that?
No, you're more like you spend time with family, don't you?
No, you've got a bigger family because you're typically older, so you've had kids, grandkids, even great-grandkids, who knows? And, there are, I think that, as I said earlier, if 40 is the new 30, then 60 is the new 50 or even 40. Retirement is a very different animal.
Yeah, it looks very different now, doesn't it?
It used to be winding down, on a rocking chair with a glass of lemonade.
Gardening.
Doing everything very relaxing and just, I've worked all my life. I can now die in peace, right? That was retirement, yeah? Now it's, you work your whole career working for other people, working for a company, working for a boss, and spending all your time dedicating to, not necessarily your own pursuits. However, when you retire now, the amount of people I know retiring, starting their own businesses, doing, traveling the world, having all these amazing experiences. And what do you want your retirement to look like? Do you want it to look like, the rocking chair on the lawn, or do you want it to be something you can really look forward to and get excited about? And as I said, that's one of the best parts of my job.
Yeah, I think my mum's been retired for a little while, but my dad's semi-retired, but he's never going to stop, is what we've realised, because during COVID, when work slowed down, he struggled. Yeah. He was like, I don't have enough hobbies. He was like, there's just not enough for me to do. He was like, I need to work for something to do. Otherwise, there's just him and my mum in the house. And he's like, it's a lot when you're both not working. Like, you don't really appreciate it. I mean, COVID probably highlighted this for a lot of people if unfortunately they did lose their jobs, or even working from home. When you don't have the external things to do or work to keep you busy, there's a lot of hours in the day.
I completely agree. I do think, though, contrastingly to that, though, if you are fit and able enough to carry on working, all for that. And if you love what you do, if you're passionate about it, then crack on. And I really implore people to do that. The other thing, though, is that when we think about retirement and pensions is I'm 32, about to turn 32 actually, and I've realised in the last couple of years that I want to get back into sport. I want to start playing football again, which I haven't been doing because I've been thinking, a bit too busy, a bit too career driven and stuff. So, and you think about when you get older, and if you can, how old's your dad?
60. He's gonna be watching this. I'm gonna say 65 this year.
Well, there we go. You can get a state pension soon.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And if you're fit and you're healthy and you can carry on working, you feel good and everything, fantastic. Yeah. But the sad thing is, as we get older, our bodies do start to decline.
Yeah, right, especially if you're in a physical job.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that, what happens if you don't have enough money and you need support, you need care, because I'll tell you, this is a very sad thing. The only difference between an old man and an elderly gentleman is how much money they have. Yeah. Right. And if you, what kind of care would you like to be able to provide yourself, and also other people as well, of course. People get sick, people get ill all the time, right? And having that kind of nest egg that you're able to support your family with, a pension is a good way of doing that. Yeah. So it's just something to bear in mind as well. Sorry to put it on a bit of a downer, on a sad note there.
No, it's kind of like when we have to talk about inheritance tax. Yeah. Like pensions and inheritance tax sort of go hand in hand because they're around that sort of age that everyone starts thinking about them and they become the most important thing. Yeah. I think whenever you talk about these things for later in life and, passing money on to family members, it always gets a little bit morbid because you're always talking about like the final stages. Yeah. Yeah. But it's something that we all need to think about. We can't all think about just right here and right now.
Yeah, no, agreed. As we said, with the pension side of things, it is a longer term investment. I think adding it as we said, a tool in the belt is definitely something you should do, especially for the longer term. For shorter term, obviously, I know you probably do a lot of work with ISAs as well. I would definitely have both of those things on the go. As I said, the only difference is in a tax perspective is that you can contribute 100% tax-free in terms of the income to a pension. Yeah. Whilst when you pay money into an ISA, it will be coming from post-tax money. Yeah. So if effectively every £100 you put in, depending on your tax bracket, it's a lot. You've had to earn more than that, effectively.
So if people can sort of take away from this and think about pensions as being similar as investing in shares, because you could be investing for a long time, but they are a tool that is more tax beneficial at the end. So you'll have more money in your pocket at the end because you get the tax benefits when you pay in, and then you've got more tax benefits when you take it out, like the 25% lump sum.
Correct, yeah, as well. I think with a pension scheme, not being able to access it until 55 is actually a very positive thing in terms of once it's in, you can't get it out. It's a bit of a lobster pot, right? And so therefore it kind of forces you to save. An ISA obviously is great. You can contribute £20,000 a year to your ISA. Again, it has to come from post-tax money, effectively. However, you can pull your money out of an ISA virtually at any point, right? Yeah. And when it comes to falling into your estate in terms of tax, unless you're married, it does just fall into part of your assets, right? It's unlike a pension scheme, which gives you that benefit to pay out to whoever you want, basically tax-free. So there are obviously benefits to that. Again, the other side of that is if something happens to you and you desperately need that money, and of course it does happen, then an ISA you can take the money out of, whilst the pension scheme,
it's locked, isn't it?
Critically ill, unless you are about to die, terminally ill, you won't be able to take the money out.
Oh, really? They're quite strict on
They are. It's and it's kind of up to you to prove
how ill you are.
Yeah, really. So it is a bit, so definitely don't. It's very cliche, but don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? And it's sometimes you can apply that saying to a lot of things.
Yeah.
But I think with this, it definitely is use it as part of your arsenal.
Yeah.
Property, tax, property as an investment.
Mm-hmm.
We all know the benefits of that, right? And then ISA, more liquid, smaller amounts, pension, income. I'd probably say for retirement planning, I try and make sure that clients are, have those three: an individual or private savings account similar to an ISA in the UK, property for all the reasons that we know, and then pension for the reasons we've just spoken about. They're kind of the three pillars of retirement, I would say.
Yeah, and I think now everyone is more aware about why it's good to invest, and I think social media has been quite good with that. There are a lot more podcasts, and YouTubers are making a lot of money now, and they talk about investing quite a lot. So I think the younger generation are more aware of what they should be doing, because when we were in our 20s, no one was really thinking about investing, really, unless you were in finance or in that world. It's only since maybe the last couple of years, I think it's come to light a bit more. We're like, oh, okay, actually, I want to invest in shares or crypto. I want to do something. I want to get more. I want to make money from the money that I've got.
I think that's come from the digitization, though, of the world, the way things have gone. It's mad to think all the things we can do on our phones these days. The fact that, you've got all of your banking apps, cards, all my... If anyone stole my phone, they'd stole my life, basically, So anyone watching this, please don't take my phone. That's why it's so close right now, I think, with the access you've got to, especially the company that I work for, we've got a number of different apps in which you can do savings, you can do regular investment, you can do pensions, you can do crypto. We've launched an NFT platform as well.
Oh, wow.
So the point of that is you've got all these different options right at your fingertips, and with advertisements, etc., that are online, you get to see them a lot more as well, because these companies, they do hold a lot of money and they want to increase their client bank by speaking to younger people as well, because they know if they can start people early, then they've got you
locked in for years.
Yeah, I guess so. I was thinking more about they can ultimately have a bigger pot, but they will be locked in for years. I guess. Yeah,
it's always good. So you are based in Italy, but obviously your clients are all over the world. Do you deal mainly with clients that are, say, expats, or what's your client base usually made up of?
Yeah, so the company which I work for, we typically, let's say, work with expats. And that, we have our main office is probably Dubai, right? Because there's obviously a massive expat community there. Whilst with Italy, it's quite unique because we don't have a huge expat community, unlike, say, Spain, for example, which does. But what we do have is a large number of Italians who previously worked in the UK. I'm not sure if you know, if you've been around London a lot.
There's Little Italy, isn't there?
Well, yeah, I mean,
down the road.
Well, Little Italy. But especially around the kind of, Soho area, and then there's lots and lots of Italian restaurants, Italian-owned businesses. And did you know that apart from American and French, there are more Italian bankers in London than any other nationality?
Oh, really?
Yeah. So the main demographic of people that I work with is Italian bankers who used to work in Italy, who have moved back. I then also have retail clients who we look and manage about starting an international pension for as well. But to be honest, I don't have, let's say, a specific type of client that I work with. Everyone has kind of got different situations back in the UK. It could be an English lady who's come back and she's got multiple pensions in the UK from ex-employment at different pharma companies, and then we look at either consolidating those or managing those from a UK perspective or an international perspective. Maybe a guy who's come over just on a short-term contract in Italy, but he has got some sort of financial stuff he needs to sort out before he moves back. We can also take care of that as well. So I don't have a specific demographic, but in Italy, it's definitely returning Italians who are the people we mainly speak to,
It's interesting what you said, because I've always wondered this, and I've had this question a few times, is if you've got lots of different pension pots from different employments, and a lot of people forget that they, the job they had when they were 20 or 23, and they say they moved around a few times, they may have 5, 6, 7 different pensions. So can you consolidate them all into one? And how does someone do that?
Yeah, sure. So there's a number of different things you can do to kind of get that ball rolling. The main thing you need to do first is literally just take a pen and paper, write down everywhere you've worked until you've had and right up until the present, okay? And effectively what you can do is two things there as well. The first one is if you've worked at a company for more than 2 years, let's just say roughly that, okay? They have to basically keep your pension scheme in force.
Okay.
Right? Or they can transfer it to your next
new
employer,
place, yeah.
Right? But if you've been working there 2 years, they keep it in force. If you work less than 2 years, what they'll typically do is give you a refund of contributions, right? So when you leave that company, they'll pay you back anything that they'd done, okay? So get a list of all these different companies, right? If any of them are over, or whoever you've worked with, any of them are over 2 years and you're not sure, okay, the best thing you can do is just contact their HR department or their pension. They have a dedicated pension arm there, okay?
Yeah.
The other thing you can do is use the government, a tool on the HMRC website, which is the pension tracing service, okay? You put in your ex-employer and it will bring up a list of the employment of the companies linked to that employment. You click the exact one because there are different arms of different employers, and it will tell you the name of the administrator of that pension scheme.
Oh, fab. So you know who to email and to get in contact
with.
Yeah.
And then you can track it down. Another one, obviously, is speak to any ex-colleagues you're still friends with and see if they know. Sometimes that can be a quicker route, And then what you can do with that is, just as a sort of side note on this as well, the second thing is that we haven't touched on the state pension yet either, is that effectively what you've got is as soon as you're issued your national insurance number, let's say, you are earning state pension credits, juvenile credits they can be called if you're at university.
Okay.
And or full-time education, right? And basically you can also check your state pension online. If you go on to Government Gateway, you can look up your state pension forecast and it tells you how much more you need to contribute and for how long in order to get the full state pension. So do you know much about the state pension?
I know in terms of if you're self-employed and you do not you miss a year of your class 4 contributions, you can miss out on your state pension. So you have to make sure when you're self-employed that you're voluntarily paying. This is only if your profits are slightly too low to trigger national insurance. You should voluntarily pay it. But because I've always been employed, it's always been on my radar, but I know that I don't need to worry about missing a year or something happening. I would only really consider it if, say, the worst happened and I needed to get a new job. Yeah,
it's a funny old one, national insurance, because it's the way it's structured is that it's the people in the middle who pay most, really, because if you don't earn up to a certain amount, you don't pay anything. So let's say people on lower incomes aren't paying national insurance. If you earn, doesn't matter how much you earn, if you earn thousands or hundreds of thousands of millions or whatever, you only pay up to a certain amount. Okay, so this is why there was a big backlash recently with regards to Boris Johnson raising national insurance.
It was like 1.25%, I think.
So it's the people in the middle, the everyday working person who is seeing a tax increase. Rich people won't even notice because it's already at the limit, and then people on very low incomes who need government support weren't getting any kind of incentive. No. They're not paying anything at the moment. They're not going to get anything back, right? So with the state pension, it works effectively pro rata, right? So 10 years minimum. If you contribute less than 10 years, you're not entitled to a UK state pension. So minimum's 10 years. And then it gradually creeps up. So the maximum is 35 years for the full state pension. So 10 to 35 years. And then anything in between that is what you effectively get. So of the full state pension, which is around £9,300 at the moment a year.
Oh, I was going to say in total, geez, that's not a lot. But
no, £9,300 a year, which,
It doesn't hurt.
No, I think it's part of a retirement plan.
It's just that extra cash. It's just about £800 a month. Tax-free. So it helps pay the bills.
Good maths.
Roundabout.
Exactly. No, I mean, it helps pay with groceries. You're not going to starve ever again, put it that way. But it also goes up with inflation. It goes up with something called the triple lock, which a lot of people have heard of, which is the higher of AEI, so your average earnings, CPI, and then 2.5%. Okay, whatever's highest out of those it goes up by that. Okay, So I think it's important with the state pension, as I said, to factor it in to what your retirement plans look like. Don't rely on it. Do not rely on it.
Especially with energy bills, do not rely on it, because that's pretty much your monthly energy bill.
There you go.
If you're not on a fixed plan.
In Italy, they've, this is more to do with the conflict at the moment, but we've had we've been told not to use aircon this summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they've said. And when we get into the winter, it was 29% of the whole country relies on Russian imports.
Oh, wow.
Of oil and gas.
Yeah.
Yes, only second, I think, to one other country. I can't remember.
Is it Germany?
I think it's Germany. Yeah.
Germany's like the highest, isn't
Germany's
it?
the highest, which is why they haven't sanctioned them. We're going off on a tangent here. I mean, okay, so this is interesting as well, actually. So part of the reason why I actually reached out to you, Tash, to do this podcast or speak to you about it recently specifically. These geopolitical events actually do have a big effect on pension schemes. If you take the three big ones, let's say over the last 4 years or so, we take the ongoing conflict at the moment, COVID and Brexit. Okay. So when it comes to, especially where I am in Italy, double taxation agreements and overseas transfer charges for transferring pensions internationally, Brexit has, because as an international resident, you have the statutory right to transfer your pension to anywhere else in the EU or to another country, but there are a lot of hoops to jump through. Brexit has made this incredibly more complicated, as we've seen from how certain other assets are taxed from a perspective in Italy. In Italy, you pay something called IV tax, EV, and you pay this on property that you own internationally. When you're part of the EU, you get a discount. It's 0.76% of the value of the property, the average value of the property in the area that you live in from when the EU is incepted, so early 90s, right? So it's
quite low.
Very, very low. Britain has just left the EU, or has done over the last couple of years. So what they've done now is they are now taxed on, Italians are taxed on their UK property like they would anywhere else that wasn't in the EU, so which is 0.76% on the total value of the property.
Oh, wow, so it's gone up a lot.
I've had clients go from paying a couple of £100 a year to now 20,000. If you've got a £1.5 million flat in London, you've just seen your tax go absolutely through the roof.
So they're taxed on it annually, so it's not like just when they sell it. So it's not like capital gains tax.
They'll have to pay that as well. Italy's a very high taxing country. There are incentives for people to move back, but if you're just living there, it is very stringently taxed.
Is that why you think there's a lot of Italians that say go and work in London to go in finance or banking, or just to come over to work for a bit and then come back later?
Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, it's fine.
I think it's because purely because London was seen as the finance capital, especially of Europe, and what you've got is infrastructure in London. Great. There's a lot of banks are headquartered there. However, what we're seeing is that my second largest client portfolio is actually in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and the infrastructure that's going up there is just fantastic now as well. Like the amount that they never used to have those sort of the banks that they had headquartered there, and you're seeing all the skyscrapers go up, and in Italy, etc. as well. That people are just feeling, oh well, maybe it's time to come home. I don't need to be here anymore. So and you can. There's always that pull of your ancestral home.
Yeah, and go see your family, and
or not, or run away from them, and then maybe go back.
When you get older, you always want to be closer to your family. It's only when you're younger you want to go and see the world, and you don't need them.
That's a very interesting point. Going back to what we were saying about the type of clients that we get. If I actually compare Dubai to Italy, I think if we're totally honest, people don't move to Dubai for the culture.
No,
really. It's more for greed, let's be honest. And there's nothing wrong with being ambitious or wanting to make more money or doing better for your family, but that's typically why we see people move to Dubai, is to make more money, tax-free living. Yeah,
it's the big affluent pull. Everyone knows if you get offered a job from Dubai that you're going to hopefully end up better off, because you don't need to worry about tax as much, even though it's more expensive with your rent and general cost of living, but the pull of no tax, anyone hears that, they instantly want to go. Yeah,
exactly. Apart from you, because otherwise you wouldn't have a job.
I know. I can't really move anywhere. I'm stuck in the UK.
Exactly. Whilst the people who move to Dubai obviously do it for those motivations, I could go and do my job in Dubai and earn my money tax-free. But as you say, higher standard of living, a high cost of living, not terribly much in terms of culture. I was there actually last week, and I can see why a lot of people like it.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's good
place.
fun. Yeah. It's like Disneyland for adults, I guess, in that way. Had the best curry I've ever had in my life.
Oh, really?
Oh, God, it was the best one I've ever had. Khyber. I am endorsing that.
Yeah. They should get in touch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sponsor this podcast. If I compare those to the people who I meet in Italy, it's definitely much more of a cultural move or a family lifestyle based move, and that kind of factors into the type of advice you give. Because for me, a lot of I do is a lot around protection of assets and making sure that if something happens or the worst happens to you, your family are looked after.
Yeah.
Whilst in Dubai, it's returns, investment, how much money can I make?
It's all to spend now sort of thing.
Yeah, it's all just kind of, nouveau riche in that sense. So I guess it's a preference really on the type of people you want to work with, and also what your ambitions are for that asset that you've got. So.
A couple of weeks ago, I asked you to reach out to your client base to see whether they had any questions they'd like answered. Do you mind reading a few of them out?
I don't at all. And I actually had some questions asked to me that I genuinely had no idea about. So I am a student here as much as anyone listening. So, the first question I had here was, I have a client and his company is registered. It's in the British Virgin Islands. Okay. And he wants to buy a house in the UK. He's looking at it probably around £1 million. He just says, what does he necessarily need to be aware of?
Yep. Okay, so when there is a company that is registered overseas, so it's not registered at Companies House, so it's not a UK registered company, then we just need to be aware whether that company is performing any UK activities. And by that, is it trading in the UK? At the moment, if he's not got a property in the UK, he's not performing a business activity, he doesn't need to worry about UK tax because all of his activities are outside the UK and the company's registered outside, so it's not classed as a UK resident company. So that's all fine. But if he does buy a property in the UK through that investment vehicle, so through that company, then he needs to be aware of a few things. So one of the main things that overseas individuals and company owners aren't aware of is something called the annual tax on enveloped dwellings. So we call it ATED because it's such a mouthful. And if you buy residential property in the UK with a value over £500,000, then and you're going to live in that company personally, then you will get severely taxed. And you'll get taxed not only through ATED, which is an annual charge for the whole time you own it, and that can be on £1 million, that's something like maybe, I want to say around £3,000 to £5,000. But when you go up to say 6 or 7 million, going into £60,000 and £70,000 a year. And so you get taxed through ATED, and then also stamp duty land tax when you first purchase the property is a flat 15% charge. So you don't use this slice basis. It's just 15% on that 1 million, and that is your stamp duty land tax liability. And the reason that the UK do this is to prevent people using company vehicles, so that's why they call them enveloped dwellings in ATED, to buy personal property. They want the properties to be owned in the individual's name.
Well, this is super interesting as well, because I obviously you were talking about it recently with regards to the conflict, as we sort of said. Whereby the oligarchs in Russia have got these UK properties that they own, and effectively what they're doing is sort of laundering money through them. Is that right? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, so the reason that they're bringing this in is so they can trace who actually owns the property in the UK. Because at the moment, UK property owners are registered at Land Registry. So you can do a search at Land Registry for every property under your name, but if you own property through a corporate structure, then it will come up with the company name. But if it's a UK company that's registered at Companies House, you have something called your PSC, which is your person of significant control, and that always has to be an individual eventually. So you can trace it through. It takes a little bit of time of putting the puzzle together, but essentially you can see who owns what. But with overseas entities, we don't have the knowledge or the database like Companies House. So you'll just have that overseas, say, BVI company listed as the owner. But with this register, you're going to have to also declare who's the ultimate beneficial owner. So it won't just go, say you've got your BVI company and then another company. You have to go all the way through that corporate structure, however it is, to say who is the individual that actually is the ultimate owner of that property.
That's interesting. Do you think that perhaps other assets may start to kind of fall into this radar that is being created at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a big step forward by creating this register. It's going to operate exactly the same as Companies House. I would imagine it's going to be declared at Companies House as well, because they're going to give you a very similar code. And I believe that what HMRC and the government and the fraud team will do, and what they're trying to eventually figure out is which assets can they freeze. And potentially we have the risk of they could do a check on how many properties you own and then compare it to your tax return.
Yeah.
Are you only declaring £5,000 a year of taxable income, but you have 35 different properties?
Yeah.
So I think they'll start to use this information in some of their cases against, they call it illicit funds. It could be anything from terrorism to drug money to any other sort of activity that people aren't paying tax on and, isn't for the benefit of the country.
Okay, so another question. Why do non-residents have to pay capital gain tax when they sell UK land property? Because they didn't until 2015, is that right? So why the change?
Well, as usual, the government wants more money. They know that they can get some tax back. They need some more money in the pot. So, before 2015, overseas residents, be that companies, be that individuals, when they sold land or property in the UK, they didn't have to pay any tax. So that's great. And sometimes that was because obviously they may need to pay tax in their own resident countries. But in 2015, the rules changed, so that in April 15, the rules came in for residential properties, and then all other land, so commercial or just bare land or anything remotely related to land that can fall in the pot, came in April 2019. So what we call it now is if a non-resident sells land or property in the UK, then you have to rebase it.
Okay.
And you rebase it at its 2015 or its 2019 value, depending on if it's residential 15, if it's not residential 19. But the rules are actually quite beneficial and can sometimes work in non-residents' favour. So you have three options. One, you can work out your gain. So when I say gain, that is your selling price minus your original purchase price, minus off any costs associated with the purchase and the sale, and minus off any refurbishments or significant works. We call them capital works. So if you enhance the building in any way, then you have the amount at the end called your gain, and you get taxed on that. So your option one is work out the calculation from the day you bought it to the day you sell it. Okay, what's that amount of tax you're going to pay? Then you've got your second option, which is you can work out you've got your selling price, your cost at 2015 or 19, and you should get that professionally valued, minus off all your costs. Okay, is that gain larger or smaller? And most people may instantly think, oh, you obviously want to do the 15 or the 19. But if you've done a large refurbishment in 2014, you're going to want that cost to be deducted against your gain. And what about if in 2015, for some reason, there was a boom in that area for property? And your third option is to time apportion. So you work out the gain like point one, but then you only pay it on the time apportion from 2015 or 19 to the date you sell. So you actually have three options, and you work out which one gives you the best outcome, which one gives you the lowest gain or perhaps the biggest loss. And then you're allowed to choose that one and declare that to HMRC.
Okay, great. No, time apportionment relief is something that we do a lot for clients who are predominantly going to move back to the UK with the use of offshore bonds, purely because the income and tax you can take from them, depending on how long you were abroad for, how long the policy's been enforced, you can effectively draw a tax-free income from an investment scheme, similar to a pension, but with probably a few more benefits. It's just getting it. It's one of those things, again, when we come back to information, if I could be waiting at, Milan Linate Airport with a big sign saying, I'll help you with the finances now, that would be the best thing. But the truth is people have got much more pressing things when they first land in Milan. Probably finding the best, I can tell you the best pizza place, I can tell you the best pasta place, but to be honest, it's best to go and find those yourselves. But, much more important than getting your offshore bonds set up. That's for sure. Yeah. Okay. So one last question, shall we? Okay. So this is a good one actually. Where can non-residents find information about their reporting obligations? Because I get asked this all the time.
Do you know, I think that UK residents struggle with this as well. It's because it's information overload. The easiest place to go, first port of call, should always be the gov.uk website. But it is quite hard if you don't know what you need to search. They do have an overseas residents page, and then you can find, different bits to click on there. Otherwise, you can just type the question that you want to ask into Google, and then you will have articles and information written by all different types of people. So that might be accountants, it might be tax advisors, sometimes it could be pension advisors, finance. And just read a few of those and see whether the themes are matching and whether you have sort of a base understanding, and then speak to your tax advisor.
Of course, and keep listening to
always listen to the Taxable with Tash podcast. I will do an overseas episode at some point, but it is a minefield because each country has their own set of rules, different double tax treaty, different considerations that you need to think about. Yeah,
I think it's going back to the double taxation agreement or double DTAs as we keep them short as. Sometimes you need to be a bit wary of these, especially if you're planning on moving abroad and you get advice regarding the double taxation agreement. A lot of the time they are completely irrelevant in order to actually get the advice that you need, because you can have a UK pension and live in Italy, for example, and people say it's absolutely fine, I can keep it in the UK, there's a double taxation agreement, it's fine. But the truth is there are still a number of things which remain, which are irrelevant of the DTA. So one of those being lifetime allowance. It doesn't matter that there is a DTA, you are still charged LTA. There is something called the OTC, which is the Overseas Transfer Charge. Unless you live in the EU or the EEA and you want to transfer your pension, that's 25%.
Oh, wow. So you can lose a chunk of it.
Exactly. Which obviously I'd never typically advise clients do that who don't live in that jurisdiction. But again, nothing to do with the DTA. When you take money from a UK pension scheme and you live abroad, they automatically deduct 20%.
Oh, withholding tax.
Yeah. Right? And then it's up to you to reclaim that money back from the UK, right? Or pay the extra depending on the type of scheme you have. But the point is do you want to be doing that for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
I mean, when you live in another country and
you've got to pay advisors, and if you're not taking a lot out of your pension, you could end up with so little in your pocket, it's not actually worth it.
Exactly. And I think that, this is sometimes when I get a little bit, frustrated about people saying the double taxation agreement, it's fine.
It's that safety net that people think they have.
It doesn't matter. No, totally right. The people think they can sort of rely on that. And the truth is, it's like you can definitely take a much more positive step by looking at restructuring or doing something slightly different with that pension scheme, for sure.
And always before you move, advice is always get advice and talk to all of your advisors before you decide to move somewhere.
Information is king, completely. And as I said, I actually try to be quite agnostic when it comes to advice. My job really is just option A, option B, what's better for you.
Yeah.
I do advise clients who have arrangements. Sometimes I have clients who come to me and say, Zach, can you just, putting a different set of eyes on what they've already done.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can just go tick, 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 you're great. You don't need to pay me a dime.
They just want to know that there's no skeletons in the closet, that they've thought of everything and they've done everything they needed to do.
And the sad thing is, it's typically the people who are not paying any attention to what they're doing who are the ones you definitely know you can help.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes if you just take, as we sort of said before, take 20 minutes for yourself. That's all you need, is just to sit down, put your ducks in order, take a look at what's available. It might be that you don't want to do anything with what you've got. It might be that there isn't anything you can improve on. 9 times out of 10 there is something you can improve on, always, as we all can. However, it is just taking a little bit of time not to do that.
So if someone is watching this and they want to get in contact with you, how should they reach out?
The best way with me is typically through LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot. So Zachary Stafford is my name on LinkedIn, and there's a picture of my face. So
yeah, and I'll add some links at the end of this as well,
Sure,
and
of
in the description.
Yeah, so that's the best way. Just add me on there, because I think the important thing there obviously has all in writing. It's basically a CV.
Yeah.
But one of the things I am most proud of, and sometimes you have to be, is I have my client recommendations on LinkedIn. And when someone writes your recommendation and says, talks about what you've managed to do for them, it really does, makes you feel good. It's the best part about my job. It really, really is when
puts into perspective for you, doesn't it?
Exactly. So and therefore you can see that a few people do trust me. There you go. So
yeah.
there you go. So that's the best way to get in touch with me. And then from there, I do calls for free, give advice out for free, and then it's only if we be totally transparent, talk about my cost, let's say, it's only if you think you want to become a client of mine. Or
if you think you can definitely help them.
Exactly. That's when we move into what we call chargeable territory, so to speak. But any advice, any questions anyone has, please just drop me a message, and I'm more than happy to answer for them.
Yeah, you've definitely made pensions more accessible, and I'm going to use the word exciting, even though I'm a tax nerd. So for me, it's exciting because now I can actually talk about them. Probably I know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
But it's always good to have an awareness and an understanding, especially with something that's going to affect you. So it's going to impact your later life.
For sure. So.
Great. Well, thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much, Tash. Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
Thanks.